Hello and welcome to the Wild Tales Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bona. I usually avoid talking about current events since people listen to podcasts on their own schedule, whether it's the week the episode comes out or months later. But this week has been an exception. I feel compelled to share. As you may know, I live in Los Angeles and we've been facing some challenging times with wildfires. Before I go any further, I want to assure you that my home and my family are safe. We are never in immediate danger, but unfortunately, I know several people who lost their homes. My guest this week, Eddie Pence, recorded the story with me on Monday, the 6th. By Tuesday, fires broke out in the Pacific Palisades and Altadena, fueled by historic 100-mile-per-hour winds. Then, on Wednesday, another fire ignited in Hollywood, the Sunset Fire, forcing Eddie and his family to evacuate. Thankfully, they were able to return home the next day. In moments like these, having a comedian tell funny stories to lighten the mood might sound ideal, but it's not the direction this interview took. I usually don't ask my guests to share their stories with me beforehand because I want to have an authentic reaction during our conversations. Eddie chose to talk about all the animals he's lost in his lifetime, some in heartbreaking and tragic ways. What unfolded is an honest discussion about loss and grief, but also a lot of laughter along the way. Humor can be a way for some people to process grief, and Eddie and I are definitely in that camp. That doesn't mean we care any less. It just is how we navigate our feelings, especially handling grief. Everyone does it differently, and that's okay. With that being said, let me introduce Eddie Pence. He is a comedian who has performed for my Laugh for Giraffe shows to support giraffe conservation. He's also the co-host of the Ralph Report, which you can find on Patreon. And he's also host on the podcast Not Today and The Ramble, the man of many podcasts. Eddie is a very funny and delightful person, and I really enjoyed having a chat with him, and I hope you enjoyed too. So without further ado, please let me introduce you and welcome Eddie Pence.
I have a lot of so many tragic pet stories from my childhood. So I guess I could just talk about all of them.
Okay, well,
Just tragic pet stories.
podcasts really, are they meant to be therapy?
I don't know. I don't know.
Is that what you need right now?
Maybe I need to talk through it. I
Is
just need
that
to
why
get it
you
out.
agreed to be on? I just need
Yes.
someone to talk to about this.
I have to
Mike's the
unload
guy.
all of this tragedy.
He understands.
Hamsters, birds, dogs. It's been a
Look, I've had pets my whole life. I've worked with animals my whole life. I've dealt with my share of tragedy, and that's the problem with these animals. They don't live forever.
No, you're buying. Like I used to have a bit in my act called about hamsters, and they only live a couple years. And you're literally buying a tiny tragedy. You're just buying a tragedy that's going to happen to you.
I think we just need to stick with like parrots and turtles, and then we're good.
Right. Get some that lives. That's actually the tag of the joke. It's like, I know I'm not going to get my kid a pet that lasts. Here you go, Timmy. Here's your sea turtle. Have fun with that.
No sea turtle.
Make sure your grandkids feed him.
Yeah.
Like just.
Yes. Here's your 6-gilled shark.
Yeah. Here's your parrot. Remember to will it to your children.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to hearing it, Eddie. Thank you. Eddie Pence, thank you for being on the podcast. Comedian extraordinaire, podcaster. Can't say no to a podcast. So I
cannot. It's in my DNA.
Oh,
have to agree to a podcast every time I'm asked.
I thought you might be an easy guest to get.
Easy. The easiest you'll ever find.
That was the fastest yes. Hey, Eddie, you want to be on my pod? Yes.
Yes.
When? Now?
Now, can we do it right now? Is this the podcast?
Like, no, Eddie, this is a text message.
Just wait.
No, well, let's get into it. Let's get into your tragedy. I'm here for you. We can work through this.
I've had pets my whole life. My whole life I've been I was born into a house with pets. Like my parents had 2 dogs when I was born. A little Chihuahua named Tiger that was my dad's dog, and then another dog that my father had midwifed and resuscitated during birth because it was born still, and he resuscitated it. And as a thank you, the owners of the dog gave that puppy to my dad, right? So that was a beagle named Buck. And this is what it's not a tragedy. It's just an awful, terrible story. I can tell you tragic stories about pets, but this one's just an awful story. The Buck, he was a beagle that he lived to be 19 years old, which is an extraordinarily long life for a beagle. And I was probably, I don't know, probably 8 or 9. And I have a younger brother, 2 years younger. And he was, 6 at the time. And he was a very mischievous younger brother, always doing things to get in trouble. And he was always the youngest. So I was the one, as being the oldest child in the family, I'm the one who had to break I'm the one who all the rules were set for. The younger siblings don't have the rules. They live scot-free.
As a
right?
younger sibling, I understand and I appreciate that.
We went through the wall. We bloodied ourselves so you guys could run through and have fun. Like that's what the older sibling does, because the parents are like, I have a child now, and we're going to set up all these rules, and this is going to be this and that and this. And then by the time the second kid comes along, they're just, whatever you want to do, just leave me alone.
Us babies owe so much to the older siblings.
You really do. You really do. So he got away with everything. And he used to have this thing where he would run out in the backyard and defecate. He would just go defecate in the backyard. He was 6 years old. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world to go into the backyard and defecate.
Okay.
And we were like, stop doing that. My parents like, stop doing that. You go to the bathroom. You go into the bathroom to take a dump. Do not do that in the back. And one time he did it, and Buck walked over and ate it.
Okay. All right. This podcast is over.
And the running joke in my family at the time was like, oh, Buck was the name of the dog. He's like, he thought it was just a black banana. I'm just like, no. Just an awful pet story.
Sometimes dogs are gross. Like
dogs
that.
are the gross. We let them in our bed. We let them lick our face. And they are one of the filthiest animals you could possibly imagine.
Agreed, but that's the situation you're in. Your parents raised a feral child, and Buck took advantage of it.
He took complete advantage of the situation. Buck was an outside dog. We never let Buck in the house. Buck lived in the backyard because he was a disgusting animal. All right, human feces. So we started this off pretty well, right?
All right, well, so let's go from disgusting to tragedy.
Okay, this is the list of pets I had growing up as a child, and these are the tragic ends that all these pets had. Okay, I had Buck, right, and he lived a long life. He wasn't a very tragic tale other than the black banana incident.
But he was 18, right? Is that what he's 18?
He was 19. He lived to be 19.
That is an old dog. And how old were you when he passed away?
When he passed away, I was in middle school, so I was probably like 11 or 12.
And was that your first pet to pass away?
That was the first dog I had that passed away. I had lost, like I said, I had 3 hamsters. I had 2 parakeets. I had what's the little tiny lizards called? The ones that not a newt, because those are water amphibious.
Newt, salamanders, like the little, I don't know,
little green ones that you could get in biology class.
Oh yeah, little like geckos or
I think it was a gecko or something. And where we had them in biology class, and then the teacher at the end of the year was like, "No, you can take your lizard home." So we got to take it home. And you got to feed it crickets. So Buck died peacefully in his sleep when he was 19, and that was heartbreaking because he was a really good dog. But I had hamsters were the first loss of a pet I had was my hamster, Sid. And the way he passed, we put him in the ball, right? The little hamster ball where they just go around the house, right?
I don't know if I like where this is going.
You probably won't like where this is. So we put him in the ball, right? And that was the fun thing. We just put him in the ball, and he'd run around the house, and we're watching TV, and we had 2 dogs, and we had Buck in the backyard, but inside the house we had an indoor dog, Abner. He was a Lhasa Apso.
Yeah.
Not the friendliest dog.
We got him little foo-foo dogs.
Little white, long-haired dog, and he only liked me. He hated the rest of the family because for some reason we adopted him from a shelter, and I guess he was abused. You couldn't pick him up. He would bite you if you tried to pick him up. So he was not a good dog, but he liked me. I'm the only one in the family he never bit. So we had we had Sid in the ball, right, and he was running around the house, and then I hear my mom scream in the kitchen, and we're watching TV. I'm like, oh, and my dad runs in there, and he steps out of the kitchen. He's like, do not come in here. I'm like, oh, why? And at that point, I think I'm like 12, 10, 11 years old. This is before Buck. I'm like 10. And I'm like, why? So I go in there, and there's just Abner had somehow gotten the lid of the ball open and just obliterated Sid. Just obliterated Sid. And I'm just
poor Sid.
and I just start screaming because I've never lost a pet. Up to that point, I'd never lost like a grandparent. I'd never lost a pet. I never had loss of a living thing in my life
Right.
until I had Sid. And that one hit me harder than any pet because it was the first one. It hit me harder than any other pet I'd ever had because it was the first one. And it took me like a month to get over Sid dying. And my parents tried to cheer me up by buying me another hamster. And that I geniusly called that one Sid 2 because I'm a brilliant child.
You're so clever.
So clever. So Sid 2, and then he met his tragic fate. Okay, so he was in this is so bad. We had like this bar in our house in the family room, and we always had our pet cages up there, our parakeets and our hamsters, right? And Sid 2 was in his little cage, and he had one of those old hamster wheels. Do you remember the old ones that were set on the triangle, and it was a metal wheel, and it had the bar across? Because the newer ones were like the plastic ones that were attached to the side of the cage, and they can get in and run around.
Yeah, I know
the old school ones were just the metal wheel with a bar across each side, and then it was based on a triangle, right?
Right.
And so you could always hear because it was squeaky. You always hear it was just squeaking all the time, and that's how we knew he was up. Because if he wasn't sleeping, you'd hear the wheel go. And because you couldn't see into the cage until you stood up and looked into the cage. And so we heard one night we're just laying around watching TV, and we hear the wheel just going squeaking. All of a sudden we hear just a clink like that, right? I'm like, oh, what happened? I've never heard that sound come out of the cage before. And we go and look up, and I guess Sid at one point was on the wheel going really fast, and he tried to get out of the wheel before it stopped. And the metal bar caught the triangle at his neck.
Oh no!
And just snapped his neck. He was just dead in the wheel with his. This is so bad.
No, I had a similar thing happen.
Tragic.
Now I want to go on my therapy with you, but
yeah, please.
I had a cockatiel.
Okay, I always wanted one of those.
No, it was great. She was
great.
I
had parakeets.
I worked at a pet store in high school.
Yeah,
no surprise. And then I got a cockatiel there, and I had her through high school. I took her to college with me. She had this nice, beautiful cage with a swing in the middle.
Right.
And she would like to kind of grab the edge of the swing and pull it to the edge of her cage and like jump on it and swing. And she'd have like a lot of fun doing that. And I don't know what she did, but I'm in the room one day. I'm hearing her doing that because the swing had little bells. I hear swing, swing, swing. Then I hear like a clump, flop. And she just hit the floor. I'm like, what was that sound? I go look up and like, her neck's broken. And it was, yeah. I was like instantly like just devastated.
How did she break it? Into the wall or falling off the thing?
I don't know because I wasn't watching her because she kind of had to like, bring it, her little beak, bring it into her, and she kind of tucked her head like, and, with the swing like under her head. And
yeah,
I don't know. I can't imagine how what happened.
Brutal.
It's just these animals. Sometimes they do stupid things and they traumatize us
so horribly
into our adulthood. I can imagine being a child and your first animal death is something so quick and
is slaughtered by your other pet.
Yeah, because ideally, if you have a pet or you have kids and you have a pet, it's like sometimes you want an animal you can prepare them for. Like our pet's getting old now, just so you know, they don't live forever. Here's something you can expect. Not one day like, oh, the kitchen's a bloody mess. Don't come in here.
Do not come in here. It's because like we had my son Colton. We had I've been blessed my whole life when I've had dogs. They've all lived to be extremely old. Like my Buck was 19. Abner lived what we thought because he was adopted. We had him for like 14 years, so he was at least 16. Right. So he lived a long life. My first Jack Russell Terrier, Charlie, lived to be 17. My second Jack Russell Buster lived to be 17. And then we just got Stanley a few years ago, and he's 3. But Colton grew up with Buster, the Jack Russell Terrier, and he passed away, like I said, in 2018. He was 17 years old, but he was an old dog. Like at one point we had him in diapers. He was getting incontinent. Like you could tell, like it was coming towards the end. So we could prepare our son, who at the time was 9 years old, I believe. So we could prepare him for what was happening.
Right.
And so we took him, like he had that, I guess Buster got hit with that, I forget what it's called. It's when the equilibrium in the head gets off, and then they think the horizon is vertical.
Yeah,
in their head. So they're standing there with their heads crooked. They can't straighten up because they feel that the horizon is vertical. Right.
Right.
I forgot what it's called. There's a name for it. I think it's called old dog's disease or something like that. And so I think it's called old dog. And so he wasn't getting any better. And the vet said, if he's not better in 3 days, if it doesn't correct itself, then bring him in. And it was getting worse. And so we took him in with Colton, and we talked to Colton the whole time. Like, we're going to go in, we're going to put him to sleep. He's had a good life. Just prepare yourself. And we went in, and we went into the room, and Tracy and I are like in tears, like, because this is the first dog she's ever had. And we'd had this dog at this point since the beginning of our marriage, like 17 years.
Right.
We'd had this dog for a long time. This was our first child, basically. And so we're just a mess. And Colton, we're like, Colton, do you want to come in the room? You can stay outside if you don't want to, right? And Colton was like, no, I want to come in. I'm like, okay. And then so Tracy and I are just standing, like Buster's laying on the table, and the doctor's coming in. He's going to give him, the first shot, which makes him relax, and the second shot, which makes him go to sleep or whatever. And Colton's like, can I hold him while they do it? I'm like, wow, you're way more in tune with your feelings than I am. Yeah. I'm a mess. And I've been through several pet deaths, and I've never handled it like that. And he's like, can I hold him? And we're like, okay. So he sat there, and we put Buster in his arms. And Buster was like, at that point, he was so old, he was always shaky, right? He was always shaking because he was at that age. And the doctor gave him the first shot, and he just relaxed, right? For the first time in years, he was just relaxed. And Colton was holding him, and then they put the other one in, and you could just see, like, he slowly just faded away. And Tracy and I are just a mess. And Colton is like, he's just paying him. He's like, that's it, Buster. Good boy.
Oh my God.
And just totally walked him over the Rainbow Bridge like a well-adjusted human being would. And Tracy and I are just like, I can't believe he's gone. And it was just like, it was amazing to watch my child able to handle such an awful moment with such maturity and mental health. Like, just to be able to, like, no, this is part of life. This is what happens. I'm sad, but this is what happens. And it's just better than I ever could have handled anything like that. Especially for his first pet.
Definitely.
Pet. Yeah. So
I mean, that shows, so much like emotional growth at such a young age.
And you're such a better human than I will ever be. And you're 9.
Jesus, I don't think I'd be inviting you on to make me cry.
Well, talking pet tragedies, I got more horrible stories.
I know. Yeah, I had my kid's first dog passed away in 2016. Actually, it was around December.
Okay.
So we just, celebrate that anniversary. Thank you, Facebook memories.
Right. No, Buster passed away in December 2018. So we just had all those memories too. So
yeah, I hate it. You look at, what's my Facebook memories? And then, like, all these memories of your old dog comes up. You're like in tears. Like,
yeah, brutal.
Like, yeah. Like, what are we, 8 years later? But my kids, we did an in-home euthanasia, and they're the same way. And they were just very, just in tears and just devastated. As their first dog. This one best dog I'll ever have. Yeah. And then, like, the next day, like, so when are we getting another dog?
Right.
And I'm like,
that's what Colton was like. He was like, when are we get another one? I'm like, let's wait a second.
I need time to process this. All right. But I was not ready.
It was weird because we weren't ready, because this is the first time I had never in my entire life been without a dog. From the moment I was born until Buster passed away and I was at the time, I think I was like 44 years old. I'd never not had a dog in my life for 43 years. And we went about a year and a half without a dog. And every time I walked into the house, from the moment we walked in the house after we took him to the vet to put him down to the point we actually brought Stanley home, for that year and a half, every time I walked into the house felt empty to me. Like, there was, like, the animal, the pets you have are always, to me, it's like it's the heartbeat of your home. Like without a pet in your house, you walk into that house, you're like, this house doesn't feel like a home. There's no heartbeat to this house. The animal has such a presence in the house, and once
Right.
it's removed from the house, you feel it, and it doesn't go away. It doesn't ever get better until you replace it with another animal.
Yeah, it does. I mean, those dogs, they're right up there at the front door when you walk in.
Right.
They're there to greet you. They're always in a good mood.
Yeah.
Unlike
They're
unlike
sad
our
when you leave.
un-
Just
unlike our kids.
unlike our kids. Good. I like sometimes I walk in the house and then I'm in the house for 30 minutes. And I live in an apartment. It's not a huge house. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. And I'll be like, and Colton will be on the couch, and then I'll walk by. He's like, "Oh, when'd you get home?" I'm like, "I've been home for like 30 minutes, dude. You've been stuck on Fortnite for 30 minutes and haven't even realized I came in the house." Where Stanley is all up in my face from the moment I walk in the door.
Exactly. That's why dogs are better than children.
So much better.
If you want to take a
So
lesson
much
from this
better.
podcast, it's
So
dogs.
cheaper.
They're cheaper.
They love you more.
Yeah, you don't have to pay for doggy college.
No, doggy collar. A couple squeaky toys, maybe a vet bill here and there.
Yeah, well, let's not
So
get
much
into vet
cheaper.
bills.
Pet insurance, that's the way to go. I've learned
Right.
that with all the pet tragedies in my life. Pet insurance is key.
Yeah, well, my wife works at a vet clinic, and that's the only way we can afford to have animals.
Dude, when we first got Buster, we got pet insurance. I mean, I never had pet insurance on an animal before, but it paid for itself 1,000 times over because he had a lot of health problems later in life, with eyesight, and he had a bladder stone. Like he had a bunch of stuff that we had to get operations for. That had we not had pet insurance, it would have been like, oh, we might just have to let him go. We may have to just put him down.
It's ridiculous. I hear these stories all the time, and it's just such a tough decision because we love
It's
these
awful.
animals.
Yeah,
but when you
like
get
how
a
much
bill, an estimate for like, oh, your dog needs a surgery, and it's $6,000,
Yeah,
and he may or may not survive. It's like that's
rough.
Yeah, that's tough to make that
Especially
decision.
you get a dog that's diagnosed with like cancer or something. You're like, okay, well, I don't want to let him go, but his quality of life is going to slowly deteriorate. And am I keeping him alive just for me? Because he's not going to be enjoying life. And like, do I want to put him through chemo? Like, you're dropping a lot of money, and it's that awful decision of like, do I let something go or do I try to hold on to?
Exactly. Animals are tough.
They're
we
tough.
love them. We love them, but they don't make our
them.
lives easy.
No, they're tiny tragedies. They're little tragedies that you've bought yourself. It's this little ticking time bomb of tragedy that you've bought yourself, and you have no idea when it's going to go off.
So
no idea.
Call this episode is Tiny Tragedies with Eddie Pence.
That's what they are, man. I had a parakeet. Here's a parakeet tragedy. I had a parakeet. We had 2 parakeets. My brother and I both got parakeets. We went to this is back when they used to sell animals in pet stores. And we went to the mall and we got parakeets. This was like in the mid 80s. And I got a green parakeet. My brother got a blue parakeet. And we'd wanted parakeets so badly. And we got them. And I got them home. I named mine Pookie. Pukey. I don't know why. It's a stupid name. And my brother didn't know what to name his. But we got it home, and it was like the meanest parakeet you'd ever seen. Like you could not go in the cage; it would just attack your hand, and he would just bite you and scratch at you. You couldn't bring him out and put him on your finger. You couldn't do any of the parakeet stuff you do with a parakeet, like put him on your shoulder. You couldn't do anything with the thing. You had to keep it in the cage because it was like a rabid parakeet. And we named it Rambo.
And so Rambo, how adorable,
right? It's a little Rambo parakeet. And so it got to the point where my dad's like, screw this parakeet, and he took it back to the pet store and returned it. And my brother was fine with it because he didn't care. But I had Pookie for like 3 or 4 years. And I used to draw pictures of Pookie. Pookie was like, he was my Sid replacement. Or after Sid 2 met his tragic end, Pookie was my replacement. And I came home from school one day, and Pookie was on the floor of the cage.
Oh no!
I'm like, how did? What? I was sad, but I'd already gone through Sid and Sid 2, so I wasn't like destroyed. I know what I signed up for when I got a pet. And I was upset, but I was like, how did he die? Like, how was he gone? And I was trying to figure out because he wasn't in like a weird position. He was only like a year or 2 old. He wasn't like he died of old age or anything like that. It was like, what? Couldn't figure it out. And I was just investigating the cage, and I looked, and there was something missing under his beak, like the beak of the parakeet. And I looked under, and the bottom part of his beak, the bottom jaw was missing.
Oh no.
And I'm like, that's weird. And I looked around, and it was laying at the bottom of the cage. I guess he had got his beak caught on the cage and he went to pull away, and it ripped off his bottom jaw, and he died.
So apparently, unless you're a dog, you do not want to
Don't
live
come
in the Pence household.
Unless you're a dog that likes to eat human feces, do not live in the Pence house.
We got cockatiels and hamsters. Did your parents ever go to a pet store, or did they just go to the local carnival?
Well, we used to get every Easter. We had a friend who owned a farm, and he would bring baby chickens, little chicks to every Easter, because the hens would have chickens. So he would bring 2 chicks over for my brother and I, right?
Oh,
And we
adorable.
would raise them until they got big enough, and then we'd take them back to the farm and then release them back to the farm, right? And we did that for a couple years in a row, where he would just bring chicks over. We had a little cardboard box. My dad built a little light in there so they would go and get warm around the light or whatever. And one day, remember I was talking about Abner, how he bit everybody in the family, right?
Right.
One time he bit my brother on the lip.
Okay.
My brother went to give him a kiss, and he snapped him, just nipped him on the lip, right? But it was enough to give him a stitch on the lip, so he had to go to the hospital. Or
Oh,
had to go to ER to get a stitch in his lip. And when we reported a dog bite, they have to report that to animal control.
right.
Even if it's a house pet, they have to report it to animal control.
Yep.
And so they're like, "Is the dog have rabies? Or is he up to date on his rabies and stuff?" And we were like, "Oh yeah, sure."
Oh,
My
no.
parents, no, he was not up to
No.
date on rabies. He was not on any of that. So literally, like, okay, we're gonna have someone come by from animal control tomorrow morning to look at the dog and make sure, just keep him in quarantine, keep him somewhere where he's not part of the family. We just want to make sure he doesn't have rabies. And we're like, okay. So my dad literally runs out that morning to go get rabies tags for my dog, just to make sure that just to give the animal control people he doesn't. But meanwhile, while he's in quarantine, we had this porch that was sectioned off from the house. So you could, if you shut the doors, you couldn't get to it. So we kept him on the porch, which happened to be where the baby chicks were. And much like the way Sid met his demise, Abner got into the chick box. And so we got home from school, and it was a grindhouse film in my porch. It was just chicken parts everywhere. He had just gone through all the Abner was rabid. No one liked Abner except me, because he only liked me. So I would not. They always wanted to get rid of Abner. But I was like, no, we're keeping Abner because he likes him. Though he killed several pets of mine.
Yeah, well, just don't say that he's rabid and from animal control when they show up.
No, they don't like that word. They get really antsy around rabid.
Yeah,
So
the main way to test for rabies is to test the brain, which you can't do on a live animal.
Live. So once you do that, you've already eliminated the problem anyway. So what's the point?
Yeah. So, all right.
So there you go. I think that's the most. Well, I had a fish tank. Here's my last tragedy. We had a fish tank, right? And my dad, for some reason, wanted to throw the football in the house with me and my brother. So we were throwing the football in the house, right? And he threw it from across the room, and it went through my brother's hands, and it hit the glass of the fish tank, and the fish tank just opened up all over the floor, and we lost all of our fish that way.
I had
a lot of tragedy in my life.
I have a story that's not tragic, but when I had when I was in school, when I was in high school, I was living at home. I was at high school. Yeah. I had a turtle. I had a red ear slider turtle.
Okay.
You've seen them. They're the turtles you normally see in like local ponds and stuff.
Right.
And I would feed him goldfish on occasion, like live goldfish.
Oh.
And it was kind of funny. He'd chase around, eat the goldfish. And one day I bought like 5 goldfish, and he ate 4. And for some reason, 1 he decided to never eat. And this fish grew to be bigger than the turtle. So I move away from home. I go to college, and I can't take all these animals. I'm like, I'm not going to take the turtle. My mom didn't want to take care of the turtle.
Right.
So I gave him to a neighbor who had like a little backyard pond. She took the turtle, but my mom decided to keep the goldfish.
Right.
Which I thought was funny. This goldfish that was supposed to be food got to be like pretty huge and lived a long. I can't remember how long it lived.
What's the thing about goldfish? They grow as big as their environment lets them, right? They just
exactly, yeah. So yeah, that was kind of funny about that goldfish. That's supposed to meet its demise. Should have been a tragic story for the goldfish.
That's the thing about goldfish. They either die as soon as you put them in water when you get them home, or they live forever and grow bigger than a dog.
That's true.
That's the crazy thing about goldfish. There's no in between with goldfish.
Yes, instant death or live forever.
Yes, that's instant demise, eternal life. That is goldfish.
There's no middle ground.
There's no middle ground. There's like, I had him for 6 years and then he passed away. That's not a goldfish.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I guess the lesson is don't ask you to take care of your pets.
Unless it's a dog. I'm great with dogs. They all live to be almost 20.
Eddie Pence, great with dogs. That's the...
Great with dogs. Horrible with everything else.
That's the lead line on his LinkedIn bio. Eddie Pence, great with dogs, comedian, podcaster.
Don't get my hamster.
Don't get my hamster. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. Follow Eddie Pence. Is it at Eddie Pence?
At Eddie Pence on all the socials. Or you can go to eddiepence.com.
And you do a podcast. I listen to you on the Ralph Report.
I'm on the Ralph Report. And then 5 days a week. Yep.
Yeah, and then Not Today with
Jen Sturger, wherever you get your podcasts. And I have the Ramble with Jerry Rocha, wherever you get your podcasts. And the Ralph Report is on patreon.com.
Yeah, man of many podcasts.
Man of many podcasts. And then I dumped all my tragedy onto you. So I hope your listeners enjoy the awful pet stories that I gave you.
And if you don't, message Eddie Pence at Eddie Pence and tell him, thanks for making me cry today. You're an awful person. No, I don't think you're an awful person. I know you love animals.
I do love animals.
I know you from supporting giraffes through my Last for Giraffes comedy show, which I much appreciate. You are number one in my book.
Aw, thanks. Just don't let me babysit your lizard back there.
Oh, yeah, my bearded dragon chilling, listening to these stories. You're lucky they can't hear.
Can they hear? They can't hear, right? They have no hearing?
Well, they have ear. I don't know. You know what? I should know this. I want to edit
this out.
This.
You're an animal person.
I want to edit this out because I should know it, and I'm not sure, and I don't want to sound ignorant on my own podcast. But now it's funny, so now I gotta leave it in.
Yeah, you have to leave it in now that you don't know if your pet hears or not.
I'm just gonna say, even if they can hear or not, he's deaf.
Or he just ignores you.
He's got old lizard syndrome.
There it is.
There it is. All right, man. Well, thank you very much.
Well, Mike,
good talking to you.
I appreciate having me on. Hopefully people tune into the next podcast of yours that's not as tragic as this one.
Next one will be happy, I guarantee it.
Good. Balance it out.
All right.
With somebody else.
Sounds good. Bye, Eddie. Take care.
Bye, Mike.
Want to give a huge thanks to Eddie Pence for coming on the podcast. Please give Eddie a follow. He's on Instagram at Eddie Pence. And if he's performing near you, go check him out. He's always a good choice to go see him live. He's very funny, very entertaining. Love his act. He's a great guy. Had a great time chatting with him for the podcast. Hey, follow me. Follow Wild Tales at Wild Tales Pod on Instagram, at Wild Tales on Blue Sky, and other places. I have a link tree on my Instagram bio. You can find me other places. That is Tails, Tails. It's a pun. We've been over this. Just go with it. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for listening. And until next time, stay wild, my friends.